Hey David, this is Bruce Seaman. Appreciate your taking almost 20 minutes to share your views. Figured at least I could do is offer a response. I like your call for unity. The only problem is we don't have much unity. The problem is, as you've articulated, the version of history that is all about white people and never about black people. See, that's one of the things about folks who are very much in support of the Confederacy and honoring the Confederacy. There is no mention of what inspired the Confederacy, which is slavery. I know you disagree, but I can send you a link to the documents, primary documents that were written at the time of secession to explain why they were leaving the Union, and all of them make it very clear. The non-slave-holding states were going to infringe on the rights of slave-holding states to have slaves. But that never gets mentioned, ever. And that's the problem. When you can't have unity when you've written a whole race of people out of your historical narrative. And that's what Bridges is about. Because it's not just the Civil War. It's not just about the Confederacy. It's about how we really have a very slanted view when it comes to race in our society, even today. So Bridges' project sees the world as needing a bridge between where white people are, like you and me, the world we live in, and the experience of black people who are living on a whole different place, living a whole different experience, that we need to have a bridge between the two to bring understanding. And one of the first places we can start is with history. So David, if you're going to take black people out of history, then we can't have unity. Certainly not with black folks. I mean, white people, we can have unity all we want, but what are we saying? See, we're really interested in community. That's the key. And community happens when people recognize the experiences of others and values them and respects them and is honest, especially when we've had bitterly painful mistakes like slavery, like Jim Crow, segregation, like instances that are obviously racial, even happening today. So we just need to be candid, David, and we need to tell the truth, and not hide from it. You know, when those proclamations from the city council, actually the mayor, and the county commission, they talk about the Confederacy and the war and the sacrifices made. They never mention black people. They never mention slavery. The United Daughters of the Confederacy, who promote these proclamations, love to make reference to how Marion County contributed so much to the war effort, Civil War effort. But I don't know if you realize this, in 1860's census, there were about 8,600 people living in Marion County. About 5,500 of them were black, and all but one were slaves. Over 60%, and that's probably an undercount because we're not sure that they actually counted all the slaves. They counted the slaves for the big slaveholders, but not necessarily for the smaller ones. Who do you think was contributing to the war effort? There were a lot of slaves working plantations, cotton, produce, other agricultural products flowed out of Marion County produced by slave labor. But we don't mention that because we don't want to mention slavery and the Confederacy in the same breath. And yet they can't be separated, because when you separate them, then the Confederacy, well, I guess it looks the way you see it, as a really great old-time era. But in honesty, slavery in the South was a despicable, vile institution. David, I don't think that's the kind of thing that you endorse. But to give you an idea of just how terrible it was, I'd urge you, if you haven't already, to read some of the accounts of people who were slaves. Of course, there aren't a whole lot, because most places it was against the law for slaves to read and write. But there are some, and they're stunning, and they're ugly. So, David, I'm sure that's not what you're thinking the South is all about, but it has been all about that. One other piece that I just find so incredibly corrupt about slavery in the South, you know, in the 1830s, when the United States finally joined with Great Britain and France in ending the slave trade from Africa, the southern states got very concerned. Their pool of fresh slaves was going to dry up. So some enterprising plantation owners created breeder plantations. That's pretty disgusting. It's right at the top of my list. Because of course slaves were property and you could do what you wanted with your property. But to almost pathologically seek to breed slaves for the purposes of growing children into slaves so that you can sell them into slavery is an exceptional level of despicable, don't you think? When we stop writing black people and their experience out of our history, which has been the custom in Marion County, then maybe we can talk about unity. Actually, we should be talking about community. But so long as the Confederate flag remains a symbol of something that has been divorced from racism and white supremacy, then there really isn't a whole lot to talk about. I mean, it's no mistake that the Confederate flag shows up with the KKK. It shows up when Strom Thurmond runs on the segregation platform as a Dixiecrat in 1948. It's no surprise that the Confederate flag shows up at neo-Nazi and skinhead rallies, because it's, we're in Charlottesville, because it's all about white supremacy. It is the primary symbol of white supremacy. It is that people that sought to make white supremacy the national identity. That's the Confederacy. I've got some real problems with that. Apparently you don't, David. And that's concerning, but that's where you are. But you need to know where I am. Hey, anytime you want to get together, have breakfast, or lunch, or dinner, or beer, or whatever, talk some, you let me know. You can message me on Facebook, that's fine. I don't think I'm going to convince you of my views, and I know you certainly aren't going to convince me of your views. I would like to see community. That's why Bridges Project is working as it is. And every time we talk about race, we get called race baiters. You see, every time you talk about race as if it actually is an issue, well, then you have people who throw it back at you. We're used to that at Bridges Project. We're okay with that. Because the only way we're actually going to move forward on issues of race is by confronting those issues and by dealing with the problems that come up in our society, that are sometimes institutionalized in our society. Because if we don't talk about it, we don't make any progress. So Bridges Project is going to keep talking about it, and people are going to keep slamming us. And that's okay, because we know we're in for a long haul. David, thanks again for taking the time to talk to me, and I hope this was enlightening for you. But you take care, and let me know if you want to get together. Thanks.